Welcome back to the Joe Mac podcast. I have a very special guest. He is an award-winning producer, director, writer, and author. His name is Fred Ashman. Fred, thank you so much for joining me.
Absolutely my pleasure to be here.
Oh, fantastic. Can you give us a little snapshot of who you are?
Right. I'm a director, but I'm also a writer and a producer. I started out as a musician, turning pro when I was 17. Directed my first television show through a junior achievement program when I was 18 at a local broadcast station, live on a weekend. And then went on to college and had a band that we put together and kept going through college, helped pay for everything as a rock musician and also classically trained trumpet. And we got pretty good. We were playing the main stages at Disneyland. We had a record contract. We opened for Stevie Wonder. We did a bunch of things, and that paid for school. So that music side has always been really, really important to me because I've used music in my productions to, when you're doing a show that is perhaps, or a video that is a corporate quote unquote video, but it's really a motivational piece. The music is a way to touch the audiences emotionally as well as intellectually. And it's a way to keep this corporate stuff from being so boring. And people say corporate, but I had $1 million budgets for shows, 10-minute video that's seen internally only. And I kept clients, some of the biggest clients in the country, as our clients for over 40 years. So following college, I started my production company. And by the time we were 30, we were a multi-million-dollar operation. We kept that going for 40 years. And then when I decided that I kind of had enough of that, and I retired. I did a feature film, and then I've done some huge documentaries as well that we made a lot of money on. But then I decided it's time to hang it up. So I retired, and that didn't last long. And I ended up directing 10 episodes of a live, regionally broadcast music entertainment show, kind of a Tonight Show sort of thing. It was fine, a lot of fun, 7 cameras, live band, the whole thing, guest stars. And then right now I'm involved in 2 major projects. One of them is called Promised Land, which you're involved with. And the other is a show called The Gloria Gold Show. With The Gloria Gold Show, I was brought in actually almost 3 years ago as a consultant to develop the concept that they had. And I was, just outside consultant, and I put together a plan, and they liked it so much and had me get involved. And now they've hired me as executive producer, and I'm going to direct the pilot in the first 4 episodes. That contrasts with Promised Land, because Promised Land is really drama and single camera style. And I'll be directing episodes 3 and 4 with Tom Logan directing 1 and 2. And Tom is going to set the tone and set the whole premise of this piece. And then I'm going to pick up and continue using what he's developed in terms of characterizations and, execute the next 2 episodes. And down the road, if it keeps going, then I'll probably do some more. And there's one other pending drama piece that I'm going to be probably directing. I'm just waiting to hear from him. So that's retirement.
Thank you, Fred. That's quite a bit. I mean, just to kind of recap, just to kind of feed that back to you, make sure I got that correct. You began as a musician early on, and through college, you were involved in a rock band essentially that kind of actually led to a contract. Is that right?
Well, yeah, we had a recording contract at the time, and that led to they released a record, and we got on the Hot 100 for Billboard at the time, but it never really went anywhere, never took off. Very small record company, they couldn't really put it out there the way they should have, and it was okay. I don't know if it was good enough to even make it or not, doesn't matter. It really launched us, and then Disney picked us up, and we did a lot of casuals, opened for Stevie. But that whole music background was all happening while I still had a absolute goal to be a television director from the time I was 12. one of the things I think is important to some of the people in your audience is you really have to, you find that people who are successful have goals, written goals, and you follow up on them. When I was 12 years old, in 12, 13, I went to school, and the teacher had one of these quote unquote aptitude tests. It's really, what do you want to be when you grow up? And mine came out that I wanted to be a television director, I wanted to be a professional musician, I wanted to be an audio engineer, and I wanted to be a pilot. And by the time I was 30, I had accomplished all of those. I have over 4,500 hours in airplanes. I've owned 4 airplanes. I've done a lot of air-to-air directing from Learjets. I have been fortunate enough to be able to follow through on all those. In the late 60s, early 70s, I mixed sound while I was going to college and being a musician and trying to get going in the production business. And I mixed sound for just every major rock group you could hear of at that time, because at that time they didn't carry their own audio guys. They came through town. I worked for the big sound company, and I was a musician and a rock musician as well as classical. So I knew the sounds and how to do it. So I ended up mixing Canned Heat, Steppenwolf, Three Dog Night, Ike and Tina Turner, Moody Blues, you name it. And I had that background. So I got to check off every single box along the way. And then I also had a William Morris agent, and I was had the doors opened in Hollywood by a guy named Nick Vanoff. If you look him up, he was the executive producer of a number of shows, including Sonny and Cher show. And his brother was running the record company we were attached to. So Nick opened the doors, and I had a concept and a show ready to go. William Morris agent, and we went in and shopped it, and I ended up with NBC wanted to pick it up. And well, long story short was, we love this, but we're going to change it, and you can't be involved anyway. I said, well, I want to direct it. He said, no, you're too young, kid. Oh, I want to be part of the production team. No, you're too young, kid, and so on and so forth. He says, but I'll give you 20 grand for the idea. And I said, but you're going to change it. You're going to kind of screw it up. He said, well, yeah, but I'll give you 20 grand for it. So my agent says, well, there's money on the table. And I said, I may regret this, but I'd rather it never get produced. Oh, the key words I just left out of the story was, and then he said, look, kid, if you want a job with us, I'll give you a job as a page. Well, that was the biggest F you. And that really made me mad. So that's when I said, I'd rather have it never see the light of day than to give it to you and let you screw it up. So as we're walking out, my agent turned to me and says, I've never seen that in Hollywood before. I said, what's that? He says, integrity. So I turned my back on Hollywood in terms of working for a studio or a network, and went on my own and found another path that I've had more creative freedom, big budgets, can do them my own way. And clients, when you connect with your audience and you create a really good product that works and works emotionally, that's when you get to come back. And I had companies like American Airlines, MasterCard, people that you would say, well, that's got to be boring training stuff. It's not at all. We did things that no one saw, won a lot of awards in a lot of festivals, and connected with an audience and got me solid work for all these years, some of them 35 years in a row, against the biggest production companies in LA and New York. And they came back to us. They would even consider them because we got the results, and we had our product could rival anything out there, including broadcast work. And then we did some broadcast work and documentaries, and then some drama things as well. But it was really that allowed the career to go. But those ideas, it all started with having those goals in the back of your mind, knowing that these things are what you want to do, and then following a path. This was never the path I intended, but it was a path that was open and seemed like the fastest way for a young guy to get to write, produce, and direct young, because I had people who would give me the money to do it young. And it just grew and grew and grew, reputation. And the other thing that's most important of all in terms of your reputation is honesty and integrity. because there's so many out there who don't have that, that it sets you up as the person who can be trusted. And who do you want to work with? What doctor do you go to? The one that you really can trust, or the one you're not sure of, but they're pretty flashy? Maybe they're good, maybe they're not. The person who delivers product and does what they say they're going to do and makes it easy to work with, that's the one that I try to be. And if you can do that, I've coached some other people, and a matter of fact, I've held seminars. A Boeing company had me come and do seminar for all their creative people and all their divisions from all over the world, in how to retain clients and such. And I looked at a lot of their product. I said, that was all pretty good. Here's a couple of suggestions, but really, you know how to create product, but does it work with the client? And it turned out that they were never allowed to talk to the in person. They always had to go through an intermediary. And I said, unless you can talk to the decision maker to make sure you're both on the same page and you're doing what is needed to complete the goal, unless you can do that, you'll never get anywhere. So those are the kind of things that I ended up writing about in my book, Advocate for the Audience, is how we negotiated deals, when we had bids, and when to pick up your toys and walk away, and when to get engaged, how to really make a pitch. And it applies in broadcast, in documentary, in any of the media forms. So those are the kind of things we got to do, and it's been nothing but fun, and I'm still having nothing but fun.
Wow. Thank you, Fred. Thank you for sharing. That's a lot of insight. So essentially it comes down to honesty and integrity, it sounds like.
Well, you have to have the ability to deliver on what you promise, and and I called my book Advocate for the Audience. Here's a copy of it. And it's really about building your brand and all of the pieces of understanding story. Story is the most important thing. Everybody says that, and it's true. Story, story, story. Finding the story, understanding the story. But the other side of it is understanding your audience. What does the audience really want to know from this? Or what's the expected outcome? Is it entertaining? Is it just entertainment? That's one side. Or is there an expected outcome? I want you to feel, understand, or just may be an advocate for this position or that position. So it goes right into advertising and advocacy, but it's all those things. But if you understand what that audience is about and what they need, and you try to fulfill that, you will be more successful. But you have to have that along with the other things. But if you deliver on what you promise, that is really a core of it. But it's a lot of things all at once. That's why the book's 300 pages.
When did the book come about?
It came about after I retired, and I was thinking, well, I don't have to worry about giving my competition secrets anymore. And this would be a nice way to pay it forward, because I had a lot of pros, both in LA and here. Because I didn't work for the big companies in LA, but I did a lot of work in LA throughout the years. And I had a lot of top pros help me as a young guy coming up. So I'm trying to do a little bit of pay it forward here. And so I wrote the book, and I turned procrastination into an art form. It took me 3 years to do it. But it was also cathartic, and really helped me put into perspective things that I was doing that I never really analyzed why they worked. I was just doing stuff, and all of a sudden I started going through it. It's all told in real and true stories, including some failures.
Wow.
Got my butt kicked more than a few times. Haven't we all?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And just to go back for a minute, you're also an airline pilot. You said you owned 4 planes.
Yeah, not at the same time. I was not an airline pilot, but I had airlines as my clients. Matter of fact, until 9/11, I had a cockpit pass on American. I could go sit in the cockpits and everything because I did so much work with them, air-to-air, air-to-air assignments where we're shooting in IMAX from a Learjet, and I'm flying co-pilot and directing. So the whole aviation thing came out of always had a desire to do that. It went back to one of my early goals. So the aviation came about because I was living in San Diego, decided I didn't want to live in LA. I was also working at Disneyland still, and I decided I'm going to take flying lessons because I can commute to Disneyland from down here and save that drive. And it was a long drive even back in the day. And then when I started working in LA, I could literally fly to LA in the morning, do work in the studios, record with James Garner or whoever we had. We had a ton of people like that as voiceovers and on-camera people, and be home in time for dinner, leaving at Friday out of Burbank at 5 o'clock. I could be home in my house in 50 minutes. Hello, that really works. And then it's a time machine, and I just loved it as well. So, and it also enhanced my brand, if you will, and reputation with the airlines. And I ended up doing a lot of work for airlines, and then Cessna Citation Jets came to me for video and events, and then Dassault Falcon, and then Learjet. So I've had all of them as clients, and it's just been a great, fun thing to do. And by the way, Tom Logan, who's directing the first 2 episodes, is also a pilot.
I was going to bring that up. I'm glad that you did. Have y'all ever taught pilot talk?
We haven't yet, but we keep saying we're going to, and we're both busy. So just finding the time.
I'm glad that you brought that up as well, because how did you get involved with Promised Land? And he's doing the first 2 episodes. You're doing the 3rd and the 4th episode. I mean, what made you decide to go for Promised Land, and how did that come about? And what are your thoughts on it? And what are your expectations?
I can give you both. First of all, I didn't ask for it. I didn't go for it. I was doing a favor to a friend in SAG, SAG-AFTRA, and they had put on a actors workshop. And I had heard that Tom was coming down, and so I went down and watched it. Lorenzo Rodriguez was the one who invited me. So I watched what Tom did and introduced myself, and we chatted up a little bit. And at the end of that, Jaron was there, and he announced that Tom was going to direct the pilot for the Promised Land. And then I was just sitting there as a person in the audience. And then he announced to the audience that I was going to direct the 2nd episode. And afterwards I smiled and I said, Jaron, I know that we're friends, but you need to talk to me before you make a public announcement like that. So we got to talking, and I looked at the scripts and such, and he said, well, will you do it? And I said, yes. And then once we got into it, we started looking at the logistics and the flow and everything. And I think Tom and myself and Jaron all came to the conclusion at the same time that the first 2 ought to be the same director, and they ought to run back-to-back production. And then I said, if you want me to, I'll direct 3. And then he said, well, it makes sense for you to do 3 and 4. So that's why it came out that way. And I've listened to Tom on a couple of the reads so far in his direction. I haven't disagreed with anything he's doing. So I'm very comfortable with letting him set up the premise and the style. And I'm going to be using a lot of his techniques and what he's set up as what the show ought to look like. But there'll be differences in the way we go about it. There's no question. Everybody's a little bit different. Every director is a little different. But I will adhere to, if you will, what's set up, and so there's continuity with the series. The series, every director should have some sort of continuity with the series, so one doesn't seem way out of whack with the others in any way. And how are the characters staying in character? So we'll be doing that.
Gotcha. Thank you, Fred. And it sounds like Jaron made the right move in this case.
Well, I hope so. I mean, I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that he gets a real high quality product. And I think that this show has the potential to be a lot better than a lot of people who go into a series like this, because it's not a real big budget production, but it's adequate to do it well. And as we take this thing forward, if the storyline continues the way it is, story, I think it has a very good chance of being quite successful.
Very good. Has there ever been any projects prior to Promised Land that kind of remind you, or kind of similar to what you've done in the past, similar to Promised Land?
Well, when I did my feature, it's a lot of drama work in it, but I've never done TV soap opera kind of things. And one of the things I like about this is the look is not going to be the classic TV soap opera. I think we can make the pace better. We can make the look better. I know Tom is going to do that, and I plan to do the same thing. It'll be, we just want to up the game off of that daytime thing. And the daytimes have gotten much better than they used to be. But it's still they're trying to grind out how many shows, 5 shows a week. That's a heck of a lot of work. And so we're going to be doing a half hour, and we got 3 days to shoot it for each one, for each episode. So that's a lot better ratio of time to what's on camera. It gives us more time to set up and do some things. Gotcha.
Thank you for that. Now, coming back to what you said, storyline is the most important. Story is the most important element.
Yeah, it's like the blueprint. You can't build a beautiful house without a beautiful blueprint.
Gotcha. I want to kind of take a side note to that, because I'm glad that you brought that up, because it kind of ties into what I have going on currently. I'm conducting interviews with a group of gentlemen that I served in the military with 15 years ago. And I'm using it as an opportunity to document our story over a chat like we're doing now, over a video call, essentially. And it's kind of a reoccurring thing. We're jumping on the line pretty much every week, and I'm chopping it up. I'm chopping up into segments. I'll shoot you the link. But as far as the storyline, I think that, essentially what I'm trying to accomplish is I'm trying to kind of create more awareness of kind of what took place, essentially, and what's possible of taking place in the future, because the military is not going anywhere if we don't utilize it the right way. I mean, but really, I'm just trying, my goal is to create awareness. What else do I need to be doing to develop that storyline?
Well, I think you need to define your goal much more carefully than sort of and kind of. Be very definitive about what you want this to say. And you may find, like any good documentary, as you get into it, you will change and write the script around what you find. The other thing is that we live in a visual world. And you need pictures, you need film clips to show what you're going to do to embellish what these people say. Talking heads like what we're doing right now, in my opinion, is boring. I'll try to be as happy it up and whatever we need to be, but without the film clips, without the music and such, to demonstrate what you're talking about, it's a talk show. And how long can talk shows go before you've had enough? I think that's really core to what you're doing, though. If you want it to be successful outside of a blogosphere, there's a lot of people who like these blogs and these conversations, but the ones, and I haven't seen any yet, where they're really running clips and such, that's where you start to capture some of the feel and you can build more emotional impact into it. And they go, oh, I see what they're talking about. I see what you're talking about. That's important.
Gotcha. Thank you, Fred. On that note, I don't know if you heard, Joe Rogan just got $100 million contract with Spotify. I mean, that's all he's doing is talking to people, just like you and I are doing for an hour, 2 hours.
I'll tell you what, there are people who are knowing how to do that and get with the right people. And I would guess that he's probably got some pretty high-end guests, known names, and that would be the key is that celebrity draw, because each one of them have millions of fans, and they want to hear what they want to say off screen or off stage. So there's your hook, there's your story, and that's why they're willing to pay that kind of money to get that kind of story, because he's able to bring in these big name stars to be on his show, and you can bet that they are not doing it free. So,
right.
You know, again, it's satisfying an audience. He's got a built-in audience that's huge. He's obviously good at what he does, and he's got the stars. So there is the story in that. We're back to what is the story.
Mm-hmm.
With your thing with the vets, you have probably some really terrific stories. How you present those to an audience and understanding, and then reaching that audience of the people who are really interested in this. It's a niche, but it's a niche with the millions of people who will love it. So I would highly recommend you think about it that way. Think about it in terms of the story, and then in terms of the execution, and then how you do it. And your actual script and such may not be written at all. And the whole direction of it may change as you get these stories. It says, I had no idea that you did this in that period of time. So, excuse me. So that is a way to take whatever you're working on. Yours is a perfect example. Sorry about that. They're calling back. And I told them to go away. That's a perfect example of how you can take what you're doing and turn it into something that's even better than you dreamed it would be. And that applies, I believe, to every genre.
Thank you, Fred. Appreciate that. That really helps a lot. I mean, it sounds like like you said, there's that the direction could change. And it sounds like yeah.
I was going back to how do you get a job? Everything's by referral. Everybody either sees your work or knows of your work, and sometimes they'll call you. In the case of in the corporate world, where you've got there's hundreds of literally hundreds and hundreds of companies trying to get these bigger jobs, it's all based on what you've accomplished and how you get the referral. I got into some companies because the executive at one company went to another company, went to their big giant meeting, and these meetings are millions and millions and millions of dollars, and said, oh my God, you really ought to go call Fred, because at my company, the stuff he was doing is way better than this. So then I would go in and get the job, and I would walk in saying, look, I have to prove myself, but I'm not here for a one-off. I want to do multi-years. And in almost every case, we had that, well, always, except for one, we had them all for at least 5 to 6 years. And some of them for 10, 20, 30, 35, 37 years was the longest run. That was NCR and American Airlines. But it's all the referral that you get. One of those referrals was a documentary, and they wanted to document how they build the biggest cruise ships in the world. And I got the call from the president of Royal Caribbean International, who was a former American Airlines executive. And I had never done a documentary big like this. A lot of what we did are really mini docs, and then we also had a number of drama things we did, but nothing like this that I'd ever done before. And I asked him, I said, "Why'd you call me?" And he said, "Because I trust you. I've seen your work. There's no reason he says, I'm sure it's transferable from everything else I've seen you do into a documentary. Matter of fact, I think it'd probably be better than most of the documentaries we see. So that's why I'm bringing you in."
Mm.
It was over $1 million budget.
Okay.
And it's never been broadcast because Discovery offered us $150,000 for it, and they wanted all the rights. So, well, spend $1 million on it. You know, it's only worth $150,000. And I told him, I said, I think that $150,000 is completely appropriate for it just being on your channel. But you want the DVD rights. We can't let that go. He says, "Oh, we have to have those." And I said, "Then you can't have it." And we didn't, it was never broadcast, but it did sell $1.75 million worth of DVDs on the ships over a period of 8 years. So, you know, and I had complete creative control. I didn't have to work with the network, some network executive saying, "No, you got to do this or got to do that." And it was all because of the trust that we got the job. And it was completely successful, but not in the path that you would think.
Gotcha. So, wow. I mean, if I'm understanding you correctly from the notes that I've taken, got quite a bit here. Sounds like the keys to success really boil down to honesty and integrity, and having people that can vouch for your honesty and your integrity in the form of a referral. That sounds like that might be the key to success in this industry.
That's half of it.
That's half of it. Okay.
The other half is being very good at what you do.
Gotcha.
What are your skill sets? And in my case, I know, to quote Clint Eastwood, "A man's got to know his limitations." I surround myself in many areas of the production business with people who are better than me, depending on the job and what's required. So I use the best people I can possibly afford to be stronger in the areas where I'm not as strong, and also to cover the bases. You have to understand that everything we do in the film and video business is really team art. The one-man shop can do some pretty cool things, but if you're doing a major project, you can't light, write, do makeup, run the camera, and direct, and do all of that all at once. And I mean, that sounds really silly, but there's people who attempt it on at least smaller scales. And some of them do pretty good with a little short or something like that. But you start doing serious production for money for people, you've got a time situation, and there's only so much a person can do. So surround yourself with the best people you can, and writing story is the core to all of it. And then how you execute that story and bring it to life is the other half of it. And how you interact with others, there's your trusted integrity, is how you continue to get to come back and do it again.
Got it.
You know, Tom and I are directing these things. Tom gets called back for a lot of things. I get called for things because we can deliver product that works. And we can scale it up or scale it down based on the budget, but still it'll be quality. And that's the other piece of it, knowing how to do that. What are your skill sets? And I'm always, and everybody I know who's successful knows that you never stop learning. You never stop learning.
Fantastic. So it's kind of essentially a team effort.
Well, it is. I like to, somebody told me once, I talked to college students sometimes, and I point out, you know, your degree in a field like broadcast or TV is on the outside really not worth a whole lot unless you're going to go back to teaching. Because I use the example, and I know that this is a real example, a guy who got his PhD in music and his emphasis was classical piano, went to the symphony to get a job, and he came in, I have my PhD in piano. And orchestra manager says, well, so what? Let's hear you play. It doesn't matter. Can you do and can you deliver what is necessary? And so all of the school that I tell them is terrific, because depending on the school you go to, you're going to meet colleagues who, as their careers go, will remember you for what you're able to do. That's why you need to be good at what you do, even in college, and you're learning all the basics that you need. But then you get out into the real world, and you've got to really up the game and grow. But the degree very quickly is totally irrelevant to what you can do to perform. I'm not saying don't get the degree. As a matter of fact, I prefer people with degrees to work with in my company. We had 30 full-time and ran payroll on 500 to 1,000 people a year. The whole point is that's where you get all the basics that you need to use to bring it home to deliver product.
Got it. Thank you, Fred. Where can people find your work? Where can people go to find your
My reel?
Yeah.
FredAshman.com. Same name, .com. And I've got a reel up there, and I've got just some information and such. But I'm not actively out seeking work. I do sell the book on my site. I went to Amazon. I'm selling the book for 25 bucks. And if I went to Amazon, they wanted the price to be 60 bucks for the hard copies and such. And at 25 bucks, I make about $8 a copy. So I'll never quite recover the money that I put into it. But the making it available, and when I do speaking engagements, I sell a few of them just to, you know, I can maybe buy a dinner with it. But it's the idea of having it and making it available at a price people can afford. And those who have seen it, and I've got some really good reviews from some pretty cool people in how it helped them. A couple of them who are active, especially in the corporate arena or the small producers who have a bunch of clients. They might be doing commercials. And there's a huge number of really good people who would like to up their game. And my book is really provided for them on that side of the business. But I've had some other people who are more into the drama and such looked at it and said, oh, this stuff all applies all the way across the board.
Very good. FredAshman.com. You want to show them the book one more time?
Oh, absolutely. Always.
There it is. Advocate for the audience. Go to his website, buy the book. It's 25 bucks. I mean, come on. Amazon was going to sell it for 60. You know, what's 25? I mean, I've gotten so much value just out of this call, Fred. I want to thank you so much. Anything else before we wrap this thing up?
No, I just say in times with right now we've got the COVID virus, and we had 9/11. Both of those things tanked a lot of companies. We almost went under. Small companies never more than 90 days away from bankruptcy. And it's the nature of our business to have these things happen. How you deal with it personally and how you keep a positive attitude is real key to how you're going to come out of it on the other side. And when you get knocked down, there's generally a new doors close and a new door will open. But you have to be positive enough, smart enough, and keep your eyes open to see where that new door would take you. With Promised Land, Jaron asked me to do this. I thought about it. I knew how much fun I'd had doing drama, and and my drama stuff turned out really well. So I said, yeah, I'd like to do this because I'm working on another very large project right now as executive producer and director on the Gloria Gold Show. And it is completely the opposite end of this. It's musical variety drama, and it's in Spanglish. It's aimed at a Latino English-speaking audience, but it's also Spanish is probably most of their primary language. And it's got a dual distribution system south and north of the border. And we're right in the phase right now. Phase 2 got funded, and then our next phase is pilot and the shows, and these are going to be a couple $1 million a piece. So it's a much bigger budget, but it's musical. It's big music show and also comedy and some variety thrown in. So it's definitely interesting because your comedians have to be able to tell jokes instantly in both Spanish and English back and forth. A lot of interplay between the languages, and we'll do things completely in Spanish, and then completely another piece might be mostly English, but that's where we come up with Spanglish, and it's a fusion of that whole Latin feel, Latina show, Latina, both show, but it's also got all the production values of the big music shows like The Voice and the other shows that are on right now. So we're using that same production value and technique. It's not a talent show in terms of talent because it's going to be known stars from the Latin world, both in the US and from South America and Central America and Mexico, Puerto Rico. There's a lot of areas, but there are so many really, really good people who haven't had the exposure. And so we'll be bringing on all pros, but it'll be a lot of different guest stars and such. And we got a lot of really cool ways of handling things. It's not your typical musical variety show.
Sounds pretty exciting. Look forward.
Very excited.
Well, I definitely look forward to working with you on. We'll be on the call tomorrow for the table read for Promised Land.
Right. We're on the table read tomorrow, and tomorrow is Tom's. He's working on his episodes. I'm only there. As a matter of fact, I probably won't even make any comments at all. I'm an observer because I want to see how Tom is developing characters so that as I do mine, I pick up on those same kinds of things so that we can be consistent.
Sounds like you know what you're doing.
Not my first rodeo.
Fred, thank you so much for being with me.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. And good luck on that documentary project you're doing. You can do this.